Hey guys, once again we're in the grips of a heat wave here in the Midwest, so I don't have a whole lot going on in the workshop. So I thought I'd give you a quick tour of a couple of my radios. I titled this video Frankenstein Tombstones for a good reason. These radios are known as tombstones because of the shape, because they kind of look like a headstone. Just like that radio in the background there is sometimes referred to as a bullet. And there's also cathedral radios that are shaped kind of with a peak on top, sort of like a church cathedral. Now the reason I call these Frankenstein sets is because they've been heavily modified and are built from parts of several different sets. This is a p1o2 643. It's the second vintage radio I ever got and tried to restore. This one isn't quite so bad. I did refinish the cabinet. This is the first thing I ever really stripped out and tried to refinish, and it's a pretty bad job, so I do want to do it again someday. The reason I say it's a bad job is I just use stain when I really should use toner lacquer, because it should be almost black, like really dark brown, kind of more like this color. And I didn't do such a great job with patching holes like this one over here. So one of these days I'll do it again. Now for the insides. Well, originally this was a battery set, and possibly the highest end battery set that p1o2 ever made, because I believe it covers, let's see, it's a whole bunch of bands. Oh yeah, 4 bands to be precise, which is pretty sophisticated for a farm radio. So yeah, this was meant to run off of batteries. Battery Maker has a video I'll put a link up to that I believe is the type of battery this would have used, which is a huge rectangular battery for powering this setup that would have connected, I think, into here. It's hard to say because this set has been heavily modified. I've already removed some of the modifications because my initial thought was to put this back to running off of batteries again. The main modification, I should say, was to run off of AC. Someone had mounted a power transformer over here and some filter capacitors, which I removed. So my thought was, I got the original schematics, I got the key components, the coils, the capacitors, and so on. So how about I just take out the power transformer and put the tubes back, which had been switched to 6-volt AC tubes, and switch them back to the low power battery tubes, and get this set running again. Well, what I hadn't counted on was that every single tube socket had been replaced. There's still the old kind, like this is still an old time 6-pin tube, but originally this was more maybe a 5 or a 4-pin tube, and the same for every single socket in this radio. I should have realized that sooner if I was thinking, because you can see these tube sockets are held on by screws now. Originally they would have all been riveted in place. There's also a couple new sockets altogether, like this and this. This is where they added the rectifier socket, and this they added an audio output tube. Neither one of these should be here. But that's not so bad. I just take out the socket and put a plate over it or something. But switching all the other tube sockets back is a bit daunting. I think there's about 8 sockets in total, so I just put this on the back burner for the last couple years, not really sure what quite I wanted to do with it. It is a fairly uncommon set, and like I said, it is a high-end set, so someday I would still, I think it'd be kind of fun maybe to strip this down to bare bones, get all the parts, and kind of build it up again as if it was a kit. But more practically, I'd like to get this set running without a ton of work, so when I saw a seller online at the Antique Radio Forum selling a chassis for a p1o2, it's a 623 for not a whole lot of money, I pounced on it. And I got it not too long ago, and I haven't really checked it out too much. But what this is, it's a chassis from, well, I used this in a number of sets. I think they used it in a bullet type radio, maybe a console, and a tombstone. And this is all original. This was an AC set. This is the original power transformer and tube sockets and so on. So The only question remaining is, does this actually fit in the cabinet? Do these controls line up? So I think it's time to pull out the 643 chassis, slide this in and see if it works. But before I do that, I'd like to touch a little bit on this radio, which I got more recently on the south side of Chicago. This is a real Frankenstein set. In fact, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what this is. I've asked online in a couple forums, done a lot of research, and still not sure. But I got a few working theories about what happened with this radio. So, the shape is clearly a tombstone. It says C.A. Earl on here. And that's where things start to get weird, because C.A. Earl was a really early radio manufacturer that didn't make a whole lot of radios, and only made them like 28, 29, and they merged with a couple other companies, but as near as I could tell, they never made a radio quite like this. The other thing that I noticed right away is that this eye tube up here is not original. It doesn't quite match the pattern of this, and eye tubes didn't come out till like 35 or 36. That's something I heard about right away online. This was a common add-on kit that people would add themselves. And when I removed this, I saw that there was a pretty crudely cut hole in there. So that at least I was able to figure out. I cannot find any pictures online anywhere of a tombstone cabinet that looks like this. Somebody thought these knobs might be majestic, so that's something to go on. But of course, this label says C.A. Earl. Now, it's entirely possible that this cabinet is from one manufacturer. This dial bezel, or scutcheon rather, is from another manufacturer, and the knobs are yet from a third or fourth manufacturer. Now, as for the insides, things get even stranger. Alright, threw the speaker out. It's in the other room. I'll grab it in a minute and show you. So here's the chassis. I'm going to pop the knobs off so I can slide it out, and I'll show you what's so weird about it. Okay, here's the chassis, and here's the speaker. It's a very nice vintage Rolla speaker, in a very nice condition, except for one minor little tear that I can easily patch up. I was really surprised how clean this cone was. I guess this wooden support here must have really kept out the dirt and dust, because the rest of the set was filthy, but this was nice and clean inside. Now, as for the chassis, well, first thing I noticed right away was that all but one of the tubes do not match what the socket labels say. The 80 rectifier socket did indeed have a type 80 rectifier tube in it, but the rest were all different. The 2A5 had a 42, and this says 55, but it has a 75 in it. And let's see, this, just have to do this one-handed. This says 58, but it has a 6D6 in it, and the first one I believe is a 57, and it has a 6C6 in it. So what I think happened, especially after looking at the power transformer, is that somebody replaced it. These old type tubes, 2A5 and 57, 56 and so on, run on 2.5 volts. These are all 6 volt tubes. So most likely what happened is the original power transformer burned out. Somebody mounted a new 6.3 volt transformer and swapped out the tubes. You can see that there are several different mounting holes down here, different from the ones that are being used now. Likewise, something weird happened up here where there was a bunch of mounting holes that aren't being used anymore, and there are these two relatively modern looking filter capacitors up here now. I did compare the tube types, and they pretty much are compatible. Like a 6D6 is a 6.3 volt version of a 58 and so on. So that probably is okay. Also notice that these are all RCA tubes, which got me thinking this might be an RCA chassis. But I have looked high and low through dozens and dozens and dozens of schematics, and I cannot find anything that uses this tube lineup. So if anybody out there has some ideas, let me know. Like I said, I've already been asking around online, looked through a lot of resources, and I found some stuff that was close, like a Majestic. I forget the model number, but it used like 3 out of the 5 of these tubes, but not this particular arrangement. So we know that there's been some modifications right away up from looking at the top. And when I looked underneath,